We are joined today by a very special guest. His name is Jay Michaelson, Dr. Jay Michaelson, and he has a biography that both impresses and stresses me out. Here's why. He is a lawyer, journalist, columnist for the Daily Beast, meditation teacher, author of 8 books, gay rights activist, and rabbi. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Thanks, Mr. Simmons. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
So I understand that you're, I don't understand, I know that you're a big time meditation teacher, and you're going to be talking to us about a little bit of mindfulness today. Is that correct?
That is the plan. Yeah, I mean, this is really where the rubber hits the road in terms of finding skills and tools for resilience. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And figuring out how to survive is not going to be, this is where it really counts.
So I know you have a technique that you want to share with us, and you also want to share with us later on 3 secrets to calming down in a crisis. So would you want to walk us through some sort of meditation or mindfulness?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And I guess I just want to preface, by a couple of things. One of the things, I work for a meditation app called 10% Happier, which is also being made available for free to lots and lots of people, including students and teachers. And I have like a really lucky thing. I get to work with some of the best meditation teachers in the world, and with you, Brian. I even got to work with you too. I'm going to be one of the teachers on 10% Happy. That's right. Spreading some of the wisdom that works. But since this crisis hit, the only stuff I've been teaching has been stuff that's worked for me. So both now, this little meditation thing we're going to do together now, and what I'm going to talk about later, I'm not like reading in a book. I had a pretty tough adjustment to this crisis. It was pretty tough. I have a 2-year-old, so obviously we're home with her and quarantined, just like pretty much everyone else. And so, just to preface this this is something that's really worked for me, and that's why I want to share it with other people. So, should we roll it?
Go ahead. Fantastic. We want practical tips that actually work. Go for it.
Great. So one thing, introducing this practice, which is going to be called box breathing, one thing to think about is a lot of meditation is just about noticing what's happening, right? Just like what's happening right now, and can I just be with it, right? So if I'm happy, I'm happy. If I'm sad, I'm sad. If I'm angry, if I'm anxious, whatever. And that's like a very, very important part of meditation, being able to relate to your experience and just like, what's happening? This is different. What we're about to do is actually not just noticing whatever's happening, but actually trying to change what's happening. Because in case you hadn't noticed, all of us are under extreme stress right now. Not just like stress studying for an exam or like stress like, social life or something, but like very serious stress and anxiety. I mean, these are really hard times. And so what we're going to do is actually, instead of like just watching the breath, which is what a lot of people do when they meditate and just stay with the breath, we're actually going to change the breath a little bit. And this is a way to really calm down the whole body mind system. And I'll say a little bit more about that at the end. But meanwhile, let's just do it. Okay. First thing is just to give us a little bit of like feedback of like how we're breathing. It's kind of going to be funny a little bit. I'm going to check on my camera, make sure I'm showing this clearly. You're going to like kind of put your fingers kind of at the side of your lungs, not quite under your arms like a chicken, but like a little bit lower, just so that you kind of can feel yourself breathing. So you can feel your rib cage with your thumbs, not like pressing in hard or anything, just like, when you take an inhale, you can feel it. And you'll see why we're doing that in just a second. So you get yourself in this kind of weird position. You can close your eyes if you want to. I'm going to keep my eyes open, at least to start. And what we're going to do when you normally breathe, there's really 4 parts of the breathing. So there's the inhaling, right? Then there's this little moment where your body is full of breath, usually just a second. And then you exhale, right? And then there's a little moment before you take your next inhale where your body has no breath. Now, normally those 2 in-between parts are just like a half a second. We never pay any attention to them. But in this, we're going to pay a lot of attention to it. So let's review. There's the inhale. There's the moment when you're full of breath, then the exhale, and then there's the moment when you're empty. So here's what we're going to do with our fingers in this weird place to sort of let us know that we're breathing, fully. We're going to do 4 seconds for each of those 4 parts. The first couple of times you do it, you'll probably mess up, which is fine. We're going to do 4 seconds inhale, 4 seconds in between the inhale and the exhale, 4 seconds exhale, and 4 seconds, this might be a little bit tricky for you, with no breath in the body at all before the inhale. And I'll explain like why this works later, but we'll just actually give it a shot. So you should be, I'm going to be talking, so my mouth will be moving and open. This is easiest if you breathe through your nose. It's just going to be kind of more calming that way, again, for some complicated scientific reasons. So if you can, inhale and exhale through your nose. So let's do it. Let's try it. Let's do a 4-second inhale. 1, 3, 4. And see if you can hold that. 2, 3, 4. And then exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then see if you can hold that. 1, 4. And then inhale again. 1, 4. A nice big inhale, holding it for 4 seconds. 2, 3, 4. Exhaling. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then holding it, even empty of breath. 2, 3, 4. Inhale again. 3, 4. Holding. 2, 3, 4. Exhaling. 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding. All right, I'll stop talking so much. Inhale. Holding. 2. Exhale. Really blow it out. Holding. Take a nice sweet inhale, like you're smelling some delicious flower or food or perfume, and then holding that. And exhale, like you're just blowing everything out, releasing, holding. All right, now I'll just count. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. There's the hold. All right, now try it on your own. Inhale. Exhale. And the hold. And again, inhale. Really filling up your lungs. And then there's the hold. And the exhale, just really empty it out. You can blow it out your nose or your mouth, whichever feels better. And then holding it empty, nice and still. And again, inhale. Nice full inhale. You can breathe into your thumbs, right? That's why your thumbs are there. There's the hold. And the exhale, you feel your lungs kind of empty of air. And there's the hold while you're empty, the still point. And inhale again. Holding. Exhaling. This is a good time to make sure your eyes are closed if they were open, just so you can focus on the breath. Inhale. Breathing into your fingers, expanding your lung capacity. There's the hold. And that full release, blowing it all out. And 4 seconds again, empty of breath, really still. And again, inhale. We'll do like 3 more of these cycles. And exhale. Really exhale all the way from the belly, that full 4 seconds. You can even cheat and exhale for more if you want. Inhale. 3, 4, and the hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, and hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2. Nice and full. 2. Exhale. And just hold. All right, 2 more cycles. Inhale. Holding. Exhale. Holding. Inhale. Holding. Really exhale. You can sigh. You're muted. No one can hear you. Letting it go on the exhale. And the hold. And let go of your fingers if they were there. So I'm happy to take questions when we get to the Q&A part on the technique. Let me just say like 2 things about why this works and why it's so helpful. First of all, just gives your brain enough to do that it's hard to be like worrying about stuff and do this breathing at the same time, right? Like there's just enough to do. And it gives the whole body mind system enough to do, which is kind of the second part. I'll say a little bit more about this in a minute, but like all of our emotions are also happening to our bodies, not just in our minds or in our hearts or whatever, but it's a physical phenomenon that's happening. So if you can you sometimes don't have to figure out, why am I feeling anxious? Like, what is it exactly? Am I thinking about this or this or this or this? Obviously, we have plenty of reasons for that. Sometimes the reason is obvious, but sometimes it's really not. You can just skip it. You don't need to figure that out. You can just skip the reasons and just go to calming the body in order to calm the mind. So that's like the takeaway. Like if you want to calm your mind, calm your body. And regulating the breath in this way, especially, you can do this as long as you want. It's perfectly healthy. There's nothing weird's going to happen. You can do this, for 10 minutes if you want. If you want to calm the mind, calm the body. One other thing, if you want, you can do this for longer seconds. So we just kept it at 4 seconds because that's like kind of, easy for people. When I do this myself, I sometimes do 8 seconds, which takes a lot if you think about it, right? You're inhaling for 8 full seconds. That's a really big inhale. And then you're holding that for 8 seconds. And then a really nice full exhale. And then you're, without any breath, also like you're holding your breath for 8 seconds. You give that a try. Obviously, if it feels uncomfortable, don't do it. But you can get really, really deep with this very simple practice. Like you don't have to memorize anything or say anything or feel anything. If you want to calm the mind, calm the body. And I'll just say, like, this really worked for me early on in this crisis. We had a lot of like dislocation in my family and being with a 2-year-old, and it's been tough. And this is one thing that really helped for me. As a meditation teacher, I also still have a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety and a lot of sadness. And this is one of the ways that's really helped for me.
Well, the sadness part, I want to ask you a question in a couple minutes. I know you wrote a whole book on it, The Gate of Tears. But as far as this technique goes, I can feel my own mind-body right now. It's very, very concentrated, which is a little bit different from when I normally practice mindfulness, which is more about being aware. So what I'm hearing in what you're saying is that this technique is good in a crisis. If I don't have 20 minutes to meditate or 10 minutes, all of a sudden what is hitting the fan. I'm losing my mind, and I can very quickly just jump right into this. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, I think, again, if we were just taking your mindfulness class, 2 or 3 months ago, you don't want to manipulate the breath. You don't want to like change your experience. You just want to see what's up, like what's happening right now. How do I feel? But in a crisis like this, that may not actually be the most helpful. It might really be helpful to actually kind of lower the energy a little bit. And you are changing your experience. You are actually trying to, you're not like sitting there trying to say like serenity now, like calm down, calm down, calm down. That obviously won't work. But you're creating the conditions for the body to kind of start relaxing. And I'll sort of skip all of the complicated science. I know next week, John Kabat-Zinn, one of the world famous scientists on meditation, is going to be here. I'll let him, he's the expert. He can talk about why this works. But there's a lot of data behind this box breathing techniques. Stuff like this is used in martial arts a lot. A lot of the like crazy stuff that you see, people being able to, do all kinds of sort of crazy things with martial arts is actually based on breath and regulating the energy of the body. So this comes from that.
So this is a really effective technique. And oddly enough, our students have their own pool of wisdom, and we're going to actually explore that in a second. So what we did was we asked them some questions. We wanted to see exactly what's the general feeling among the students now, because we're probably, I'm guessing now, 6 weeks, 5, 6, 7 weeks into this crisis. So here's what our students have reported. We asked the question, how calm are you during COVID? And roughly 70%, 68.4 said, I'm occasionally calm, but usually there's some degree of anxiety or agitation going on. 21% said, I'm more anxious than calm most of the time. That's like my default mode now. 5% said, I'm never calm. And another 5 said, totally chill all the time. So they're probably not tuning in today. They're doing something else and enjoying it. So the next question was, what is your level of calm now versus the start of the pandemic, to see kind of what's the progression, the arc. So 52.6% said, I'm getting a little calmer as this goes on. 26.3% said, I'm getting less calm as this goes on. 11% said, definitely getting calmer. And another 11% said, I'm starting to lose it. So we have a wide range of experience. And what I wanted to do is check in with some of the students' secrets. What are their secrets to calm down, right? And I just want to say to the kids, this is very helpful to me when I read these. Like, I actually use some of your techniques. So alone time in a house filled with people, it can get very hectic. And sometimes I just need time to myself to settle down. A lot of people said music. Someone specified slow music, making TikToks, talking to my friends and writing. Someone said my secret is just stick to my routine and work out. Someone said and they wrote it like this, really long shower. Someone else said, I take nice long bubble baths, which I thought were out of fashion for the past 30 years. I guess I was traumatized in the 70s. That's a whole other story. And someone said, I try to think about positive about how this will be over soon. And another student said, I breathe, which I will take some credit in that. So this is their wisdom, right? So the question, Jay, is you've talked to a million meditation teachers and experts. So you're hearing our students' concerns. What kind of just generalized reaction do you have to that data?
So yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that diversity of is it getting worse or getting better for folks? So for a lot of people, one of the hardest parts about this crisis was how suddenly it happened. If a thing that you might have done without thinking about it on March 5th, and suddenly on like March 15th would be like out of the question, or this happened so fast and it came for a lot of us out of the blue. That's a whole other story about why we weren't warned maybe by our government adequately, but definitely it happened really suddenly. There's a thing that psychologists call hedonic adaptation, which means you get used to stuff. Both positively and negatively. One reason that according to many, many studies, people may not believe this, but it is actually the case. People have studied this. Money doesn't make you happy, is you get used to having that level of money. So like now I have a Mercedes, but then a person next to me has a Rolls, and now I have a Rolls, but that person has 2 Rolls. Like, the super rich, as you can see on TV or whatever, are not necessarily happier because of hedonic adaptation. That's also true on the negative side. So things get really worse. You do sort of get used to certain things. You get used to this new routine. You get used to the new normal. And that's like a miracle of being human. On the other hand, like we also heard, for some people, things are getting worse because things are getting worse in a lot of ways. And if someone's sick, in your family, or you just have been doing this for so long and you're going stir crazy, or, you have a parent or a friend or somebody who has to go to work and they're feeling like they're at risk, there's a lot of reasons why things can also get worse. So that really struck me. But I wrote down all the kind of coping mechanisms or tools that people are using. Those are all great. Having a routine can be really, really helpful. The person who's working out, making sure that you're taking care of the body physically is really, really helpful. And sometimes our natural human tendencies hurt us. Like if it's just like, because we get into a spiral, and if you get into a kind of spiral of depression, or just not moving enough, and just like not feeling motivated, and that's totally understandable. I'll say more about that in a second, but that also you want to kind of push yourself a little bit to make sure that the body's moving and that you're eating on a regular schedule and things like that. You have to like it's hard enough. The crisis is hard enough without making it worse by not taking care of the body.
So we have a 10th grader named Jennifer, and she asks, what are some ways you can control your anger when you're stuck in a small space?
Yeah, I mean, I feel it. I totally get it. Right. One of the things I was going to talk about, kind of the secrets, like the secrets of meditation, and how to survive the crisis, has to do with like how you relate to your own thoughts. A friend of mine used a really good metaphor, which was, we have a lot of voices in our head, and we can't necessarily control those. So we might have like the anger voice, or the stress voice, or the self-judgment voice, like I suck, I should be doing better at this, I should be this, I should be that. You don't necessarily have to give those voices the microphone being your mouth, or your attention, or your belief. So anger comes up. The key thing is to not like know anyone who says they don't feel anger. If they're like some meditation expert, they're full of BS. Like, that's not true. Anger, when the conditions for anger are present, you feel anger. Like, it's cause and effect. It happens, right? It's not like there's some person out there who doesn't feel anger. If anyone who says that to you is lying. So the question is like, how do you express that? Right. So you don't necessarily have to hand the microphone to the voice of anger. So don't repress your anger. You're feeling angry. Okay. Like, I get it. It's not like, should I be angry? Should I not be angry? Fine. You're feeling anger. You're not repressing it. You're not pretending it's not there, but maybe you're not handing the microphone to that voice. So you're just like, okay, what does anger feel like? One trick that meditators use a lot is like, what's happening in the body right now. So for me, when I feel anger, I get a certain like tension in my shoulders and like strength in my arms, like I want to punch someone, basically. And I can just pay attention to that physical thing that's happening. Like, oh, here's this feeling. Okay. And that gets my mind away from like why I want to punch the other person. It gets you out of the spiral of like telling yourself the story about why I'm feeling angry, which usually just makes me angrier. So that's like a trick that a lot of meditators use. Like, you feel what's happening in the body instead of like going around and around and around. And here's, I was right and they were wrong and I'm angry. And that just makes you angrier. So those are a couple of tips. One, don't hand the anger voice the microphone, but don't repress the anger either. Allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. And then this like secret tip of like, feel it in the body instead of in your mind.
One of the things I tell the kids in the mindful fitness class very often is out of the story into the body. So anger is made up of thoughts and feelings in the body. So it's the story of, he did this to me, she said this, and all of this, it goes around and around and around. And then there's the physical feeling of what that feels like, the tightness, all of this. And when we come into the body, like you'd had us do with the box breathing, we're short-circuiting that story, right? So it gets interrupted and our attention is now focused on what it actually feels like. Is this correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah. That's exactly how to do it. And, just since you mentioned the box breathing, try that. Right. If you're in a tough space, like the easiest thing to do sometimes when you're feeling angry is to like, okay, I'm going to go take a walk, or I'm going to do, but you might not be able to do that. Right. So that's tough. Right. One of the best coping mechanisms to just, or like someone said, taking some alone time. What if you can't in that moment? Like, you can't, right? You're the person who you're angry with may think that you're like a weirdo who took too much Brian Simmons meditation, but like, close your eyes and do a box breathing cycle. Do that 4 second inhale, 4 second hold, 4 second exhale, 4 second hold, and just do it. And just, so what if they think you're a weirdo? Like, instead, you may have just been able to diffuse the situation. It's like a Jedi mind trick.
Does the box breathing help with sleep? People ask that question. Will it help you to fall asleep? And if not, how can I sleep at night? Because they're having difficulty with it.
So yeah, so for sleep, there's a couple of things. First of all, I'm just going to plug the 10% Happier app again, and we're not trying to make money because we'll give it away. Brian will give you the info and you can pass it on. There's a bunch of guided meditations for sleep, just how to sort of calm down. A lot of the problem with sleep, falling asleep when you're anxious, is you can't stop your thoughts, right? Your mind is like running and running and running, and that's totally understandable. That would be the case. So for me, I think the box breathing, you would do a little bit and then stop. You're not going to fall asleep probably doing box breathing because it's like there's like too much to do, but you could do, let's say, like 3 minutes of it, right? Just do like a couple of minutes of that, and then just breathe through your nose. That's like the secret. If you can, it's going to be better to calm the mind, the mind and the body than breathing through your mouth. And just take some nice, really sweet exhales, like focusing on the exhale, and just really let it all out. And pay attention. So that's the main thing on the breathing. My other like secret tip is just like if you're used to meditating, if you've done it before and you focused on the breath, focus on your eyelids instead, because you get that sleepy feeling that you get in your eyelids is actually a muscle fatigue, and you can just concentrate on that. Just like as if you're watching a TV program, like watch this feeling in your eyes. Just like pay attention to that sleepy feeling that's in your eyes. And when a thought comes up, you're just like, no thanks, I'm just not going to do that right now. Not like push it away, not like bad thinking, just like not going to do that right now. I'm focusing on my eyes. And that's kind of a secret that I use many nights to help fall asleep. And let me just add one thing. That is totally normal. Everyone is having trouble sleeping right now.
But even if you're not sleeping, you can do so in a way that's a little more supportive and relaxed and comfortable than just freaking out.
Of course.
So you mentioned 10% Happier app. How many subscribers, how many people are listening to this app?
So the app, I edit I edit a weekly email that goes out to 950,000 people. So that's a lot of people. And then in the app itself, there's about 100,000 people who are subscribed to the app, and another, many tens of thousands who we've just given free app subscriptions. So we started right as this crisis began, free to any healthcare worker, doctors, nurses, anything. That's now expanded to anyone who's working in a grocery store, a restaurant, teachers, etc.
So I didn't know till just now that you have a way for our students to access it for free. So thank you very much for that. And there is in the coming months, there's going to be a talk that I'm going to be giving actually about Food and Finance High School and the meditation that we've done there. I mean, you and I worked on that together. Yep. So we have 2 questions. You mentioned before about kind of beating yourself up. So 2 questions caught my mind. One is from a 9th grader, and she says, I treat myself badly in my own head, and it makes me very anxious and sometimes depressed. What can I do? Relatedly, an 11th grader, I guess had saw a video about you and read an article and said, when I see someone as successful as you, it makes me think that I will never be that successful, and I feel like I'll never be happy. Is there anything I can do about this?
Yeah, that second one's tough. Yeah, like when I was in high school, I had I didn't think I'd be successful at all. I was a closeted gay kid, so what that meant for me was like lying to everybody I knew and not being connected to my feelings, feeling really lonely. I had girlfriends in high school because like that's what you did, but like I wasn't connected. Like it was all sort of fake. And I had a really tough, I was very privileged in a lot of ways. Like I went to some, I went to public school, but I was in like a, suburban public school district, blah, blah, blah. And I was very lucky, but also really lonely. So I feel it. I think there are so many, I'm so grateful to some teachers who were in my life who helped me, and to, some books I read and some things I did. There's definitely there's so much space. It's really hard to deal with feelings like that, but there's so much space for success in people's lives in different ways. Make the right choices, right? Stick with the school, even in this like totally messed up situation that we're in now. If you can get to college, get to college. Like there's like a lot of ways that there's a lot of factors in our society that are against a lot of people and that make it harder for some people than others to succeed. And that's reality. And again, anyone who tells you that's not true is full of it. That is reality. And so that means it puts even more responsibility like on your inner resources. So just putting those 2 comments together, I can relate to like self-judgment and inner critic stuff a lot. And I may look successful on the outside, but I have a very active inner critic. That's the language that a lot of meditation teachers use, like the critic who's inside. There are a lot of tools to working with the inner critic. The main one is to just maybe give it a name, like a ridiculous name. I just read one of our teachers, female teachers, she named her inner critic Mildred. So whenever she has a judgment of self-judgment, like you suck, you're a terrible person, you're da-da-da, she just is like, shut up, Mildred.
Sharon Salzberg was here and said exactly that. She names hers Lucy from the Peanuts comic strip.
That's awesome. Yeah. And just realize that voice is a voice. That's not you. You don't have to believe that voice. That software was installed in your inner computer at some point, and it's going to be running. And it's just that you're having that thought doesn't mean you don't have to believe it or respect it. You don't have to tell it to shut up, because it might not shut up, but you just are like, okay, there's the inner critic. And there's all kinds of games you can play with the inner critic at a time like this. I mean, we are now, anyone who's like alive right now deserves self-compassion. You deserve to take it easy on yourself. You're here. This is not, especially like, it's hard for me to relate, I'm old, right? To like somebody who's like in high school, now. I can tell you something like this has never happened in the last like 40 years, right? You're going through something that is really unique, right? And nobody who's my age or older has been through what you're now going through. You are doing great simply by showing up every day. If you get through the day and you have one moment where there's like a little bit of peace or joy or relaxation, you're listening to music or you're making a TikTok or whatever, like anything, that is success. Like that is it. You're showing up. You're still here. Like try to see if there's another voice inside your head that is like, wow, okay, like I did that one thing today. Like, and that's great. Like that really is legitimately great. If you can just have one of those things and maybe journal it if you want. I do that with my daughter. Like one amazing thing that she does each day. Just to remind myself that it's not a day in, day out, every day is the same. I mean, there are days that feel different, and journaling that can be really helpful.
Last week we had Kate Johnson on, and she gave a great piece of advice to sit there and actually write down a list of all the things that are good about you. And every time someone tells you a compliment, write it down and refer to that list.
Yeah, I like a variation on that too, is like, think about other times in your life. Think about successes and difficult times in your life. So on the successes, like what are you most proud of that you've accomplished? And then think about the factors in your own mind and personality that enabled you to do that. Like, oh, so like I did this thing, I helped this person. I had a sick relative and I was able to stay with them and I helped them or something like that. And then think about like the qualities that you have, right? That you had then and you also have now that you can call on. That might also qualify as like a difficult time in your life. Like, oh, there was this I went through a tough breakup or something like that. And here's how I recovered. Here's how I like dealt with it. Here's how I was able to, and it was hard. It wasn't easy. And then think about those qualities that you have, because the critic is full of, or am I allowed to say crap on this podcast or whatever we're doing? The critic is full of crap. Like, that's not true what the critic is saying. It's like, picking out the worst pieces of you. Like, imagine you would probably never talk to somebody else unless you're a real jerk. You would never talk to someone else the way you talk to yourself, the way your inner critic talks to you. And so just learning to just not believe that set of criticisms and just be like, oh, hey, critic. Oh, hey. Oh, I see you again. Oh, you're saying something about how I look, or how I feel, or how smart I am, or how stupid I am. Okay, that's what you do. You're the critic. I don't need to listen to you.
Whatever, Mildred. So we have a question from Chris, one of our students. He's here live. So Chris, turn your camera on.
Hello.
Hey.
Okay, so my first question is, have you ever been misunderstood by people because of your identity?
Yeah, like every day. Yeah. For me, again, so I grew up in the South in the 1980s and 90s, and being gay was like the worst thing in the world. And nobody had to teach me that. I just learned it. And luckily times are a little bit better now in some places for some people. But I definitely, I grew up in a somewhat religious family. And I was just told and, believed that if I were to be who I truly was in the world, that, God would hate me, or I could never have a family, or I could, whatever, something would be wrong with me. And it took me a while to kind of get over that. And and the weird part about it was the exact opposite. When I was honest with myself and with other people about who I was, actually everything opened up, including my religious life, by the way. Like, it was actually more possible for me to be authentic and religious and spiritual after I stopped lying to everybody and lying to myself, which seems obvious, but it didn't feel obvious at the time. And, for folks who today, all the different ways in which our society tries to marginalize some people, and define them instead of letting them define themselves, that creates that misunderstanding. For me, how that connects for me, again, for meditation, is just seeing what's true for me. When I'm able to calm down and center a little bit, I can see what's actually true for me, and it's not defined by somebody else, and I can live in that truth even if other people can't accept that yet. And that's been my experience. Yeah.
So Chris, I want to jump in if I could, because you and I spoke before. You said you were comfortable with this. When you came to food and finance, you transferred to us because you had an experience. We won't say the name of the school or anything like that, but there was an experience where you felt that you were being bullied by other kids.
Yeah.
Is that accurate? What kinds of things were happening to you?
I was getting like harassed, stuff thrown at me, and I was getting stuff said. I was like getting called names and getting like racial slurs and stuff because of like how I look, talk, act, and people were just going on about it.
So let me ask you this question. When you're in a classroom and this is happening to you and people are treating you like this, and you can sense the judgment, even if the kid is not in the same room with you, are you able to actually focus on the lesson and learn?
Kind of, but like I get annoyed to a point where I can't. So like I start paying more attention to it than the lesson.
So do you feel safe now in the environment that you're in?
Yes.
And what do you think the difference is? How does the environment make you feel safe?
Like I feel over here at Food and Finance, like people are more supportive. They really don't care about who you are. Like, well, at the other schools, like people were always like attacking you for any little thing you did or who you were.
Do you have another question for Jay?
Yes. How do you deal with other people's judgment of you?
Yeah, that's a big one. It's one of the weird things I think about living right now in the pandemic, in the COVID pandemic, is like so much of what we thought was so important is now somehow a little like different or less important. And like, if you think about the things that people are judging us for, or like the assumptions that they make about us, it's like, what world are they even living in right now? Like what matters now? Like what matters now? Things like showing up, resilience, love, connection, connecting with your friends, even if you can't be with them. And like all of these things, and like the things which we used to get judged for like a couple of months ago, it's just like, it takes still like some courage to realize that that's not relevant. Like someone's judging you, if someone's being racist or sexist or homophobic or transphobic. But like now it's like even maybe more obvious, like how false those kinds of prejudice are, right? We're now we're living in a crisis. We're stuck in this thing together. And the things that really matter have nothing to do with any of those kinds of like, those vectors of oppression. Right. It's like, oh, if you can show up and like help someone or keep yourself together or like keep up with like school somehow in this crazy environment, or live with, relatives in a difficult situation where like maybe the people you're living with might not be accepting. Like those are the things that matter, those kinds of inner strength and inner resources. So for me personally, now it's different. I mean, I think if I were talking to like 15 or 16-year-old me, I wasn't dealing well with those judgments at all. Probably not as well as you are. And I was internalizing them. I was believing them a lot and feeling really bad about myself because that's just what I was believing at the time. But it's like going back to those things, like what are the resources that we have inside ourselves for inner strength? Now is the time when those are so valuable to ourselves and to other people, because we have to help each other out. It's not just about like me somehow getting through this. It's like, how can I also help a little bit to someone else, and remembering what's valuable, those inner resources, that inner strength, that inner character is what's actually relevant, and no judgment, nothing someone else says can take that away.
Chris, thank you. So great questions. Thanks, Chris. So Jay, what I hear you saying in a lot of these answers is that the outer environment actually does have an effect on our inner environment. So this idea that you can just meditate and forget about problems, people around you, I mean, that's not an accurate portrayal of what we're trying to do here with meditation, right? I mean,
no, I mean, I think there's like some cliche that like if you meditate enough, you'll be like Baby Yoda, you know, in Star Wars or something, and you'll just like be zen about everything. And like, you know, that's not actually reality. You know, reality of meditation. Like one of the things I love about 10% Happier is the name. Like, what if you could be 10% less anxious right now? Or what if you could be like 10% less, you know, consumed with like worry about the future? Like, great. You know, that still means you're 90% messed up. But no, I mean, I think that's the whole thing is like, it is to remember that we're human. And we can just be a little bit, you know, better in terms of our, I keep using the word resilience, you know, like how able we are to deal with adversity, especially when we're dealing with a lot of it.
And what you're pointing at is many of us have more resiliency than we know that we have. And
absolutely. There are these resources inside of each of us that, you know, it's just like anything else. Like if you go to the gym and you work out certain muscles, they're going to get stronger. Meditation is the mental gym, right? If you go and you do this, if you do it, you know, every day or whatever it works for you, those parts of the brain physically get stronger. Again, John Kabat-Zinn, who's in next week, can actually like, you know, he's a scientist. He can actually say what he's taught, you know, he's the expert. But as a non-scientist, you know, literally the brain changes. The parts of the brain that enable you to, let's say when you're angry, to not express that right away, those parts of the brain get stronger and get larger. Like it's a very physical process that happens inside the brain. It's not just like something that we think happens. So it's about building the parts of our minds that give us those abilities.
And in science terms, they call that neuroplasticity, the ability to bend and change the actual neurons, the brain cells, and how they, you know, so what we pay attention to actually rebuilds our entire brain around us.
That's right.
So Dakota asked a question. I think you began to answer this a second ago, but she says, ever since you started meditating, have you noticed any dramatic changes in yourself?
So like A, yes, and B, I think even more than that, my friends and family have. So I've been at this a long time. It's been almost 20 years that I've been meditating. Just to freak people out, you know, I've done some very long retreats. I've done 3-month silent retreats, meaning I haven't talked for 3 months at a time, just meditating like 12 hours a day. Like I've gone pretty crazy, right? So don't use me as the example. But you know, some of my students, people who are normal and don't go on off to a meditation retreat for 3 months in a row. Yeah, I mean, you'll notice incrementally if you stay with it, even just for a few weeks. You'll just notice, like, again, I think you notice it sometimes when you get triggered, like when someone says something or sends an email or something that's like really obnoxious, and like you realize for a moment there's just that little bit of space where you don't actually respond right away, or your inner critic says something awful and self-judgmental, and you're like, oh, there's the inner critic, instead of believing it. Right. So that's like where I've noticed it, where there's that just little bit of like inner spaciousness, where there's like a little bit like the mind just has like a little bit more space. Yeah. I mean, that's just the best way to put it, like in between what somebody does and what my reaction is. And I don't have to react to every single thing. And I don't have to believe every single thing. So I've definitely noticed that. And then, you know, there's an ability that the mind has to just kind of sit still a little bit. And it's a little hard to describe, but it's the real happiness that is possible for everybody. It doesn't depend on conditions. It doesn't depend on money or success or power, anything like that. There's a kind of core contentment, like a core kind of okayness that some people are just born with. I was not one of those people, but you can build that. You can build that sense of, okay, and just the mind sort of settles back a little bit and doesn't like grab after every single thing. And that's what I really did all those long retreats for. And that does actually happen.
So you may have sadness or anger, but your mind becomes more accepting of these things. So you don't add on other layers of resistance that make them worse. Correct?
That's right. Yeah. And I just, like the person asked about anger, and, it's like, don't repress it. It's there, it's here. But there's also the mind is the brain is developed enough that it just doesn't have to shoot back right away. It doesn't have to answer back right away. It doesn't have to either repress it and hold it down or express it and then maybe make things worse.
I'm glad you said about the long-term retreats, because I have a really hard time in my own life explaining when I do those, what the value is. So thank you for that answer. Jordan asked the question, how has meditation changed your perspective on the world and people in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're seeing right now in this moment of crisis that this line between the personal and the political is not really such a line, that the personal is political. Like there are a lot of folks, I'm not going to get like political, here, although I kind of want to, but I won't. We see what happens when rage and anger and fear are put into practice in politics. And we can see how much worse that makes things. We can also see when kindness and compassion and rationality and believing in science and, understanding just sort of how to be with things that are difficult but are true, how that can impact people and can impact our world. So I've really become kind of like a little bit converted to the cause of meditation. I started out, like you said, I mean, I went to law school a long time ago to be an environmental lawyer, to try to save the world. And I did that for a while. I did that work, and I still, at the Daily Beast, where I am a columnist, I'm still kind of an activist. And so I write about race and class and justice and environmental issues too, but mostly on those other issues in the Supreme Court. So I'm still partly an activist, but I really definitely believe that in order for our species to like survive, we have to upgrade the mind. We have to like do better. There are inside of every person, even people we think are terrible, there are parts of ourselves that are capable of wisdom and compassion. And there's parts of ourselves that are capable of the opposite. And everyone has that. We all have what some old religions might have called good and evil. I'm not sure I would say that, but we all have those different tendencies inside of ourselves. And, which part of ourselves grows the most is the part that we develop the most. If you go to the mental gym to just get angrier and angrier and angrier, and you're just like constantly like, watching like cable news or something, getting really, really angry, yeah, you're going to become an angrier person. So that's how it's shifted my view of the world. Neuroplasticity is a fancy scientific term, but it might be what saves all of us, And, if you've looked at like what actually makes people better, what actually can make people less racist or less homophobic or less sexist, like what works? Does it work to like beat them over the head and be like, you're a bad person? That doesn't actually work. They have to have moments where they grow. They have to grow themselves personally and grow up as human beings. And that's something that I've really taken with me.
Someone asked the question, does journalism calm you down?
No.
It doesn't calm me down, and I'm not a journalist.
No, it definitely doesn't. I don't think it's its job. There's a little cute saying that good journalism comforts the afflicted and afflicts the comfortable. In other words, if people are having a really hard time, it tries to make things better for them. And if people are being complacent and too easy and they're not paying attention to the problems in the world, it actually is there to make it harder. And so for me, a lot of my journalistic work is very stressful because I'm reporting on bad news. And there's a lot of it, even before the pandemic. And so no, I don't. And I actually wrote a piece that they can get online. All of our 10% coronavirus stuff is online for free on how to limit your news intake and how to not just stress out by you want to be informed, right? You don't want to unplug, but sometimes you can just like go down a spiral of stress. So no, journalism does not relax me.
12th grader said, you have done lots of exciting stuff in the world, and I can't decide what to eat for lunch half the time. Any advice?
I also can't decide. It's funny, like, before the pandemic, like when you could order in, or like eat out or whatever, those were like our big decisions. Like, oh, what do I want? A hamburger today? Do I want Thai food today? Yeah, I'm actually not so good at making decisions. One reason I've done so much is that I can't decide. But I think ultimately, like, you get to the big questions really fast, like, there's like an overlap between like what the world really needs and what energizes you. So like the world needs a lot of different things. It needs artists, it needs nurses, it needs doctors, it needs parents who can show up for their kids. It needs activists, right? It needs people to get out there. You know, we have an election this year. It needs people to be involved and make sure that every community actually, you know, is equally represented, not the way it's been for the last. There's people who are making it harder for people to vote right now, and putting roadblocks in the way of communities of color in particular, and making it harder for people to vote. We need people on the other side of that to make sure that democracy lives up to its better intentions, not the really crappy ones that sometimes prevail. So we need a lot of different things. And so then it's like finding the overlap between that and what is your passion, right? How can you, like, if you want to have a family, like how can you support your family, you know, economically, and find a way that you can make a living and overlap that with what the world needs.
We have a student who asked, I am overwhelmed by all my assignments, because the kids are learning remotely now. How do you keep up with everything you have to do, especially now with all the stress?
I have no freaking idea how people who are having a lot of like, I mean, it was hard enough before, right? You know, high school, whatever, like there's like, I am not going to like sit here and pretend that like I have some answer, you know. I mean, my actual physical answer, like I keep everything on lists. Like I'm a compulsive, like I have a to-do list that's like, you know, very organized, and like this has to get done, and then like this could get done at some point, you know, but in terms of like the pressure that people are under right now, it's true for working people also. So, you know, I'm working from home, obviously, and I have a 2-year-old home. We're, you know, right now she's napping. That's how I can do this recording, is like, because we're in nap time, and like, I can only work 4 hours a day, basically nap time. And then, you know, after she goes to sleep at night. So a lot of people are feeling that. I think it's like, from a meditation point of view, it's like, go easy on yourself as possible. Like when you forget things, like just give yourself some more, again, the meditation term is like self-compassion, just like, you're doing okay. You really are. This is a hard time. So when you mess up and you lose track of something, you forget to do something. So there's that voice that's like, you messed up. Just try to see if you can grow the other voice that's like, okay, yeah, I messed up. Times are hard. It's tough. It's tough right now. And that's from the meditation point of view. That's like, making lists is good. Like that's what I do. But from a meditation point of view, just try to always give yourself more breaks. And if your teachers won't do it, that's their problem. But at least for yourself, knowing that, like, again, if you're showing up every day and you're sort of keeping up with it, this is a really hard time for people. It will get better. It may take a little while. It may take sooner. It may take later. We don't know. That's one of the big things, is how uncertain this is. But it will. And so for now, it's like, if you can just, you know, you're at a level where you're just showing up and doing okay, that is great. And just keep believing that.
You know, we had Dr. Roberto Canessa on the show. He was a survivor of the 1972 plane crash, where a Uruguayan rugby team crashed in the Andes Mountains, and they were trapped for 72 days. And he, along with one of his friends, they hiked for 10 days over 40 miles in the Andes Mountains, and they found freedom. So he was not so much of a meditator, but when he visited us, his recipe for increasing courage in times like this are to take action. Go and do something that can help someone else. So I kind of hear in what you're saying that there's a blending of the two. There's the meditation, the mindfulness that can calm us down. And there's also the benefit, like the neurochemical release that happens in your brain when you actually write a to-do list, or you actually go and do something. There's some sort of sense of accomplishment. Is this correct? It's both things happening, the mindfulness and the taking action?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, again, I alluded to this earlier, but one of the challenging things about this pandemic is how much is uncertain and how little power we have over the most important things, right? Like, it's like, you wouldn't even take, like, suppose back in the old days, remember we used to go on like trips and stuff, like you wouldn't like take a trip to the beach with as much uncertainty as we have now, and everything is at stake, right? Like life and death is at stake, where everything is so uncertain. We don't know how long this lasts, or when things are going to change, what things change, what school is going to look like next year. There's so much we don't know, and we don't actually individually have the power to change that, right? Because it's much, it has to do with things much larger than any of us individually. And that's really hard to deal with. So what we do have power over or control over, or like where we can make, are taking small steps. So if we're in a position where we're able to help someone else, great. Right. If it's finishing, like doing the work, great. And, it can be really helpful to find those places where we do have some agency, where like, okay, I can actually do that. I can't fix this, but I can do this. I can do this piece of my life, and actually doing it. And sometimes it just is like almost an act of faith to like, kind of get off the couch, literally, or, maybe, or figuratively, like get off the couch and like actually do something, is almost an act of faith. You don't have to be a hero necessarily. You can be an everyday hero just by, again, taking care of the stuff that needs to get done, maybe helping someone else, maybe just saying something kind, writing an email or something to sending somebody just like, how are you doing? And just reaching out to somebody. So yeah, to any little action. Again, there's actually a lot of data around this, that altruistic actions that help someone else, do make you a lot happier. You feel better about yourself. You feel better about just like humanity in general. And that's true now too, obviously. So anything that you can, if you have the capacity, like a lot of us are just barely getting by, but if you have the capacity to like help someone else, that will make you feel profoundly happy, because there's a little bit, you can't affect the big stuff right now, but you can make small change in your lives and in the lives of the people around you.
And when you do these actions, when you help someone else, you just compliment someone. If you're feeling bad and you say something nice to your mom or your little brother, it does release neurochemicals like serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin. And it's a physical chemical that actually goes through your blood and actually makes you feel good.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. We're not just doing like random, like this is like, some self-help project. Like this is all proven that we know how it works in the brain and physically how it works in the brain, as you've just explained. But just try it. You try it for yourself. Just try it. Try doing, people used to say random act of kindness. Just do one random act of kindness each day. See how it goes for you.
And lastly, I got a lot of questions about sadness. Kids are feeling a lot of sadness, and they feel a little depressed. You actually wrote an entire book on it called The Gate of Tears. And interestingly, you draw a connection between sadness and joy, how they're not necessarily opposites. There's a connection between the two of them. Can you just give a little statement about that?
Yeah. So, and I have a new thing coming out in probably next week, a little talk called This Sucks. And it's about the benefit of just remembering that this sucks, that this pandemic sucks, this time sucks. But it is the same as what you just mentioned. So there's sadness, like, right? So people are missing out, like people who are, watching this are like missing out on all kinds of like really good things. And that really sucks. Like it really is hard to miss out, especially if someone's graduating, or if it's, or a prom, or it's like a summer program. I have a nephew who's a junior in high school. He was going to go to Belgium, and he got this like scholarship to go abroad for the summer. Obviously that's not happening. This is really, that's like the part that sucks. And then there's people who are dealing with really serious stuff, right? So relatives who might be really, really sick, and are in really difficult situations. So a lot of what's difficult and hard about sadness is like resisting it, like trying to say it's like it's not there, or like, you see a lot of advice like in the world out there, just like always be happy or something. I just think that's really not helpful. I think it's BS. Like, I don't think that's true. If you're sad, like, okay, feel the sadness. Like, don't go spiral into like a thing, but just feel it in the body. Like, how does that feel? Like, oh, it feels like this heaviness in the heart or something like that. Don't go into the story. Don't like repeat. Like, oh my God, I can't believe this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And like, that makes it worse. But just being in the present moment experience of sadness, if you don't resist it, releasing that resistance can actually feel really good. Like, okay, like this sucks, right? I get it. Oh yeah. And the nice parts about admitting that this sucks is there's other parts about it too. First of all, it could be worse, right? Like, it's a reality check, but it sucks for everybody in different ways. Like, everybody is having a difficult time in different ways. And there's probably a couple of billionaires out there who are fine, but like pretty much everybody is having like a hard time. Like, we're really united in that, even though we're all having different experiences. And so like kind of settling into that, like, okay, yeah, it's not, I'm not here to sugarcoat it. Like, I'm not here to be like, pretend it doesn't suck. Like, it does suck. And of course, sadness is and grief, is a totally appropriate reaction to what's happening. It would be weird to not have that, like to have to miss out, on the summer or whatever, like, or, plans that we had, or like important, like milestones or whatever, or just not see your friends, or have someone who said, like, any one of those things, you would be weird for not feeling sadness about that. So the advice, that's again worked for me, and this for a long time, has been to just accept that it's true. Like, accept that this is true. Like, okay, sadness is here. Here's how it feels like. I don't have to make it go away. I don't have to figure it out. It's just here. Here's what it is. And it does pass. And at some point it'll pass.
I don't know if you watched the film Inside Out, but in this mindful fitness class that I teach, I always open it up. The first thing we do is we watch that movie Inside Out. And really the whole plot is based on this character Sadness, who they just keep banishing her and get out of here. You're ruining everything. And it's clear that like the girl will never be at peace until finally at the end of the movie, they bring her back. And then, there's no sadness without joy, no joy without sadness. So you really can't feel joy if you're not willing to feel sad. And is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I always felt that Inside Out kind of stole my book idea, but anyway, yeah, no, that's totally right. And, you want to feel your feelings, you want to like be alive, and I think if you're not able to feel sadness, that you're not feeling anything authentically. Like, it's not that you should only feel sadness, right? And definitely look for the things right now. Like, again, going back to like the students' list of like things that give them joy, whether it's TikTok or music or working out, like do those things. It's not about like just feel sad, right? That's not the idea. But when it comes up, you're feeling it. It's real. This is part of being human. This is like a totally natural, human, appropriate response to what's happening right now, is to sometimes feel really sad. And again, that could be for whatever reason, but to just be in that experience of feeling that present moment sadness, if you don't resist it, it's actually a little closer to okay. Like, okay, here's what I'm feeling right now. I'm not going to feel this forever, but here's what I'm feeling right now. And it sucks.
So this has been hugely beneficial for me personally. And I can just imagine the young people watching this, and the staff members, and all of the people, some kids are watching with their entire families. So thank you so much for this. Before we part, is there any final words you have for these kids? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a kind of an honor for me. Meditation teachers, a lot of times meditation, it's like, a lot of privileged people meditate, and like people have spare time and like want to take up meditation as like some hobby or something. But having taught this kind of stuff now for 10, 15 years, for me, the most valuable teaching is to people who don't have like necessarily just like all the spare time and like to, take up meditation as a hobby. And, it's the most valuable for people who are going through stuff. Right now, that is pretty much everybody, but like people who are really going through stuff, it means a lot to me to be able to connect with people who are dealing with real stuff, And so I really, the work that you're doing, Brian, and that others are doing to bring this kind of way of being in the world to more and more people. If there's any way that I can help, please let me know, because it's really an honor for me to be able to share what's worked for me in the hopes that it can work for other people as well.
Well, when we come back in the fall, if we come back in the fall, or whenever we come back in the fall, will you visit Food and Finance High School?
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot. So of course I have to say yes.
Yeah. You would be the only one to say no. So
that's awesome. I was thinking about saying no just to be that guy.
Well, we're going to get all the meditation teachers, many of them that I know you like, together. We want to have a big event and really like blow this out a little bit.
I would like to have any event with a group of people right now. That would be great.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your time. I know you had to rearrange your schedule for this. We really, really appreciate it, Jay. Great to see you. Practical tips. Thank you so much. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, Chris, for your question. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Great job, Chris. So next week, we have our Common Connected at a special day and time. It is next Tuesday at 11 a.m. And we have, as Jay was saying, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who is a scientist. He is an author of many books, and he is a pioneer in mindfulness. Many people credit him as integrating mindfulness into schools, into politics, into our society in general, and he will be taking your questions, and he is very, very excited, and so am I. So until next week, stay calm and connected. Take care.